Hi everyone, welcome to the first kind of special guest episode on the Great Berate, and today I have Ross with me from Accursed Farms. How are you doing today, Ross?
Okay, still working on more videos.
Always good to hear. So Ross has a few different series online that you guys may have seen. There's Freeman's Mind is probably the biggest one. I think that's where I first found you, as I'm sure most people probably did.
These people aren't scientists, they're cultists with advanced degrees.
We've got Ross's Game Dungeon, there's the Civil Protection stuff, we've got Moon Gaming, there's all sorts of things out there. So yeah, we're just going to have a pretty casual chat today about a lot of the work that Ross has done. And also the big thing is about, I guess, activism in some sense of trying to get the word out about games dying. Although that's a pretty heavy topic, so I might go for some lighter stuff first of all. One thing I'd be curious about, if someone hadn't seen any of your videos, and you could have them watch one thing of yours, what would it be?
I'd say either, I guess one or two, so they could give up if they didn't like the first minute. One would be Civil Protection, Morning Patrol. That's where I animate characters in Half-Life that have a short story. And the other might be Ross's Game Dungeon, Mabus, Maabus. That's where I'll just I'm sort of giving tours of these kinds of interesting games, or games that I have a lot to say about that you may not get from like a normal game review thing.
That is one of those kind of games that you just don't see reviews of like anywhere else. Like there's a lot of new games I've been introduced to watching Game Dungeon, and Mabus is definitely a fun one. I was going to ask about one of those actually. So you did, I'd say probably fairly early into the series, you did a couple episodes on some things like Construction Bob, and there's also the Go to Hell game as well. I imagine at the time that you were recording those, although correct me if I'm wrong, you had planned some of the games that you'd want to do later on, like Deus Ex and stuff, for example.
Yes, yeah.
I just wondered why you chose to do episodes on games that were kind of that small in scope. Like Construction Bob doesn't have that much going on in it, I guess. It is just kind of the same three levels over and over. I was curious why you picked that over going straight to something like Deus Ex.
I guess a couple reasons. I was doing that as sort of like a Halloween crunch. I wanted several Halloween things, so I kind of wanted to build up to a bigger one. And I don't necessarily want every episode to be this long built thing that might take weeks to months to make, and some smaller games would be kind of odd and interesting. And I felt like the Construction Bob sort of fell into that category for me. I mean, it just, some games are just kind of odd, and you don't see anything quite like that anywhere else, because that one, he's like hosting a kids show. It's like,
hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Construction Bob Show. I am your host, Construction Bob.
So he jumps in. It's like, ow, 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 as he's hitting the wall. Like, oh, whoops, we're in hell. And then, so, I mean, it's a good premise that ropes you in, even though there wasn't that much to the levels afterwards. But I'd never beaten it either, so I don't know. I like the idea of some episodes being longer and some just being more short ones. So. And the longer ones, it's also a low-hanging fruit thing. I mean, the longer ones, I mean, it can take more than just the length of those videos to make them. I mean, the Deus Ex one could have taken 10 times what the Construction Bob one did. So I'll be I'll tend to want to put those off more.
Would you say you like gravitate more towards indie games than big studio games, just for that kind of weirdness you get sometimes? Then?
Oh, I mean, for the show? Yeah, I mean, my general rule of thumb is I either want to talk about something, I kind of want to present something you're maybe not getting from every single other channel on YouTube. And there's two basic ways of doing that. One is to cover a game almost no one else is covering on YouTube that has something interesting in it that people might find appealing. And the other is if it's a game everybody's played or a lot of people know about, then my take on it is you're just not gonna see stuff that you would have seen in others. That's kind of what prompted me to make the Deus Ex videos. Like, with Human Revolution, I don't think I'd be surprised if any other review of that game mentioned the part where they talk about the oil crisis. I think it was like from 2015 or something like that within the game. I was thinking, oh wait, no, this ties in the actual report made by the Department of Defense where they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, most people aren't paying attention to the text
Yeah,
walls,
so
right?
it's like so if I feel like I have something to say that isn't just a repeat of 100 other people on YouTube, then I might do it. I mean, my end goal of this is just to kind of create something entertaining that people might want to watch, even if they're not that interested in the games themselves. Then they might be sort of fascinated on, like, what is he talking about? Like, it's I kind of want to get that feeling where people would normally move on to something else, but they're a bit baffled by what they're watching, so they might continue. So that's exactly what I'd like to go for. So.
There's definitely like an area of YouTube that almost has this like strangely engaging vibe to it, where you're almost like not quite sure why what you're watching is as entertaining as it is, but it just really grabs you. Like, it reminds me of some videos of like Super Mario 64 and how to do levels with like no jumping, or like using alternate universes and stuff to like travel between. And sometimes I do feel like your channel has that kind of vibe to it, where it's just like, I'm not quite sure why this is as good as it is, but I just like don't want to look away.
Yeah, if this was the old days, I would want to be aiming for like a late night TV segment. The part where most people have gone to bed. It's just the people who are either staying up or just sort of zoned out, and they're watching this like, what is this? Like, so, like, I know it's not going to appeal to just the masses, but if you're the type that's staying up late, then this might be right up your alley.
So yeah, I've got a few questions that are kind of about some specific videos you've done.
Sure.
I remember seeing really early, I think this is the Tyrion video, you got a response from Alexander Brandon in the comments of the video.
Oh wow!
Did you see it?
I guess I'm not aware of that. I mean,
you might want to have
sometimes
look at it,
look YouTube comments. I mean, I'll try and browse some, like within the first couple of days after it goes up. Sometimes I'll look a little longer. Sometimes I don't even get to that, and it's a flood. I mean, it's an ocean. It's like trying to pick out.
Their sorting is very weird. I remember you showing a video where they're like, there's old followed by new followed by old, and they seem to have some weighting towards.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know how it works.
It's weird.
Or sometimes I'll see I think on one of them, on a recent one I did, I replied to it, and then I came back. I think the comment's literally gone, so maybe the person removed it. I don't know, that I replied to. I wasn't aware that Alexander Brandon replied to.
As far as I remember, it does sit there as the top comment. So
okay,
I need to go back and have a look at Tyrion. The question that I was going to ask though is, given the option, would you like the developers of the games of what you've covered on Game Dungeon to see what you've actually done? Would you want to hear the responses?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's some. I've had one or two reach out to me after the fact. Actually, I mean, I guess I feel a little. I mean, my only hesitation about that is sometimes I might, kind of riff on the game a little harder just to make it more entertaining, and they might take that a little more personally, though it's not really intended that way.
Right.
I mean, it's a game ultimately, so it has to be. But yeah, as long as they have like halfway thick skin, then absolutely. I'm sure. Again, I know for a fact some developers have appreciated this popping up, just a decade or two after they made the game, because they themselves were trying to see if there's anything on it. They're like, oh wow, what's this? Somebody really talked about this.
If I made Mabus, I would not be expecting a review to come out a couple of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So it's.
So yeah, I mean, if you could choose a game that you've covered on the dungeon to get responses from a developer, what would you want to hear about? What would you want answers for more than anything?
Oh geez. I'd want some of the source code opened up for Quarantine. I'd really like to see that's one where for the time, they created a pretty big and detailed world. I mean, yeah, it uses lots of tricks to, like repeating textures and everything, but it has its own atmosphere. I'd love to kind of see that at a little bit higher resolution and farther draw distance.
If you want to,
I am curious what happened with the Polaris Snowcross one. I think that game might be literally impossible to get to the later levels without hacking it on the PC version. I mean, it's sort of content that was gated off. One person in the comments said they got through it, but I don't know how. I tried that one race so many times, and I'm showing in the video, you know, I mean, I got to the point where I was doing that. I practically memorized the track. I was doing it flawlessly, and then the computer always just comes in. I mean, maybe you could have a lucky break where you manage to position it so you block it, but I mean, I guess the answer is it was a rush game and they didn't have time to do more extensive playtesting.
I mean, yeah, if it really was intended as a shovelware game, it may just be the case that they just set like a linear value that just goes up and up and up.
But the art was so. But it looked exceptionally good for a shovelware game for the time, and that's what gets me. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I want to confront the art director in Human Revolution. Just like, why tint everything yellow? Why?
He's a lizard man.
I mean, looking back, would you have done that again? I mean, it's just I want to see him get up there and defend it, you know, because that's sort of a pet peeve of mine, just tinting the whole screen. Or same for the Need for Speed World one, though I found out later you can turn that off in the config files. But yeah, just where is this trend that's thankfully kind of died down? Where did this trend emerge to just tint the whole screen? Because that happened in a lot of games, especially in the mid 2000s. Where, I mean, is it like where one game was successful that had that, so then every other publisher jumped on board? I don't know.
So one question as well is, I wonder where there's some really weird and random games that you cover on Game Dungeon, and I wonder where you found some of these, like Armed and Delirious. Where did that come from? Where did you actually discover it?
That one came from, I mean, a budget bin at a computer game store back when they were selling games there. You know, the late '90s. I mean, because I can never afford to buy like brand new games, so I was pretty much always, my options were either borrow games from friends if they had something that was, you know, expensive and popular, or else just scrounge through budget bins. And a lot of them I could kind of tell were junk, but then others would just be kind of intriguing. And that was more than the intriguing things. And then to see that had 5 CDs, I think, whoa, this is a real game that's in here. And that's where I'd find a lot of them in the past, and then later on, I would end up browsing abandonware sites actually a lot, sometimes to catch up on ones I always wanted to play but never could. And then, hey, they're abandonware now. Great, now I can finally play them 10 years, 15 years after the fact. And then I would encounter a lot of other different things too. So it's just I was basically kind of. Just through pricing, I was always kind of off the beaten path anyway. So, I mean, I'll write down a note of them so I don't forget about them, and then that's it. I just tend to ignore it for a year or two, and then like, oh look, it's $5, great. So,
speaking of catching up on games as well, you covered Uncanny Valley, which was on your anticipated games list.
Yeah.
I wonder, have you had a chance to play anything else from your anticipated games list since? Because I don't think you've covered any of this.
Actually, I had a video not long ago where it showed what I've caught up on.
Oh, nice. Okay, I need to catch up on that.
That's in Ross's big game list video.
Cool. I'll take a look.
Where I have so many. Basically, in that I tried to cover, you know, it's like my top 25 most interested games I was interested in. Look, we're in a game renaissance where it's just exploding. So I've been keeping just lists of this stuff. I can't even limit it to that much. I mean, so I turned that into a more public project where if you're someone who just doesn't know what to play or you're looking for more new games, there's a section on my website now that you can just browse them all by screenshot and genre to get an idea. This is all stuff that's sort of past my filter. But yeah, I played, I want to say at least half of them on there.
Nice. Okay.
Maybe 2/3.
Yeah, I did have a look at that bit of the site as well. It looks like
yeah,
but
there were some winner. I think my favorites on there were that they were on that list was the Metroid 2 remake. That was really solid. Dex, I enjoyed that one a lot. Let's see. The Mother Russia Bleeds was good. It was definitely good. I don't know if it was like best game ever for him, but I definitely enjoyed it.
Nice.
But yeah, there's a list. I give my ratings for all of them on that I've played in that video.
Definitely make sure to go and check that out. Nice. We should probably get into dying games, and I
Or
don't know
whatever you want to talk about.
if you want to just give some kind of background on it for people who are unaware, like what's the problem and what is it that you're trying to do about it?
Yeah, okay. So most of the time I'm just trying to make kind of weird comedy videos, a lot of it related to gaming. This is one issue in gaming that just keeps persistently bothering me, and I just can't let it go. So I'm trying to see if I can actually get it changed, which we'll see. The basic issue is for the vast majority of gaming history, decades, you buy a game and you can run it, and support may end, the people make the console or the computer, they may end, but if you can kind of keep the game in good condition or the parts in good condition, you can keep playing it. Or there might be software incompatibilities you have to fight around, or maybe emulators come out later so you can run them again. What we're seeing increase more, I mean, it happened before this, but we're seeing it just explode. I'd say starting from kind of the mid 2000s onward is, I guess, what I'm calling games as a service, where the only way to play this game officially is to connect to a server where the company that may develop the game or published it is in control of that. Because you had online multiplayer before this. I mean, stuff like Quake or Star Siege Tribes. You might, or Half-Life series. You might connect to their online central server, but then you could also connect to a friend server or somebody else who just wants to run their server. So that even if the company server went down because they're done supporting this game, you can keep playing the game. There's no problem. Whereas here, where we're basically creating games that are on life support from day one, and then once the server shuts down, no one can ever play that game again unless it's people reverse engineer the server software or the code gets leaked or something. And it just didn't used to be this way. And it's the vast majority of it is completely artificial. As in, these are not technical barriers. See, some people are going to hear this and think, well, yeah, it's an online game. Of course it ends when you do. No. It's totally a business decision that's doing it like that. And if you tried to do this, I really did some research on this. I did a big video on this called
Games as a Service is Fraud.
This practice would be considered fraud in many other industries. And what my research found was that this is untested under the law. I mean, this practice is basically newer than the laws that apply to it. So what that means is the law, you might, this sounds insane to think that, a multi-billion-dollar industry is operating. It's not that they're breaking the law necessarily. It's that they might be and nobody's checked. But so it's just kind of full speed. A real good analogy to this would be something like Uber, where Uber came along and they're not sure. It's like, well, wait, is this violating taxi laws or employment laws? Like, are they considered employees or contractors? The law wasn't ready for something like that. Right. But Uber, that didn't stop Uber. Full speed ahead. They made tons of money. That's kind of where the game industry is at. So this is a consumer rights issue too, but I care about it most because we're just having a generation of games that are completely unplayable in the future, and they're launched that way by design, and there's just no liability or responsibility for this sort of thing.
It's terrifying.
It just drives me insane. And again, it's artificial. Again, you'll see server emulators crop up. When the code gets leaked, these games get preserved. But like the recent example, well, not that recent, would be like Lawbreakers. Or actually, I think I heard recently Battleborn is going to get shut down. Or by the end of this year, the game Dirty Bomb is getting shut down. I mean, a lot of these, see, this used to just sort of happen to MMOs, which I'm not a huge player of, but I can still appreciate all the work and effort that went into them. And plus, there's a lot of MMO communities that would be happy to keep the game going if all it meant was they just have to host the server themselves. Right. I mean, I think that happened with City of Heroes. That had a real cult following. But I mean, yeah. So the way I I mean, I hate this because you'll have millions of dollars and thousands of hours going into creating these fantastic worlds, where even if the game isn't the best, you can still see all the effort that's gone into this. It might have great music or an interesting story to it, or just interesting concepts that you want to explore the world, and then they just get destroyed a few years later. Oh yeah, and there's no guarantees. They don't warn you. They just say this game could die at any time.
Right.
Selling, I guess, take any other product where you sell the product, because these are being sold as products, not services. Right. The vast majority of them. That's something else I found in my research. So that under most laws, that means you have different requirements under the law. So, but selling a product where you're given, it just says this product may be destroyed at any time after the point of sale, and then not telling you when that is and having that entirely within control of the seller, this would not fly pretty much in any other industry.
It would be madness if you could buy something at a shop and have the person who sold it to you come round and just take it off you 3 years later.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the closest real-world example I found of this was with printers, where, they sell you a printer, and then there'll be a firmware update later that removes some functionality or even breaks the printer. And there have been lawsuits, and sometimes the people suing have won. Or rather, the company settles the lawsuit because they realize it'll be more expensive to have this escalated in court and risk destroying their entire business model, right, than to just pay off the people that this screwed. I mean, so this is also a consumer rights issue, but again, I care about it because we're destroying creative works, and it's just sort of a shock value to me every time it happens. I mean, in my video, I equate it quite similarly to book burning. It's different because, books tend to have more, I guess, deep content to them, but games can have a whole lot of artistic value to them as well. And unlike most book burnings, this destroys every single copy of them. And just the only proof it even existed is just someone recording footage from it. So I'm finding this kind of shocking. And then it's just escalating with things like streaming games, which I have no problem with streaming games as an option. But I mean, Google with Stadia, they've announced that they're working, or they have at least one exclusive right now. So that means that when they inevitably shut down that service, unless the developers really go the extra mile to release it elsewhere, which they might be tied legally to do so, then it's going to be destroyed. So we're spending millions of dollars and all this effort. Again, it's basically to build sandcastles that they're profiting greatly off of. So I don't know. It just seems wrong from any angle you slice it from. That's how I'm looking at it.
And you mentioned one thing about, like, maybe it's not quite as much of an issue as book burning because perhaps games don't have the same deep content and that kind of thing. But I think, honestly, the way that games are viewed by people who aren't players of games is part of the problem, I think, some of the time, because I think they're not often seen as an art form that can actually have some, deeper meaning to it. It's just a game. Maybe even the word game doesn't help. But people would probably see books as having more value than games a lot of the time.
Well, it shouldn't even have to be an either-or situation, though. I mean, sure. Well, that's another reason I push the consumer angle, because they can understand, even if they have no interest in games, it's like, oh, okay, so they destroyed what you bought, and you're given no guarantee. It's like, yeah, that doesn't sound too legal. Yeah, it's they're being effectively destroyed after the point of sale. Right. I mean, it's more complex than that, but if you're watching this and jumping up and you think I'm wrong, watch my Games as a Services fraud video. I probably cover every angle you're likely to bring up in that.
Games as a service is a situation where the outcome is the exact opposite of the intent of the law.
Check out the description to go and have a look at that video, because it is a good one. I was going to mention the Darkspawn video, because that's the one where you first tried to like muster some actual like activity to maybe try and do something about it. I want to mention one thing about Darkspawn, an idea that I don't know whether you thought about. There's this weird thing in Darkspawn where there's no backwards progression in the game. And you were really baffled by why that was. And the first couple times I saw the video, I agree, it's a really odd decision. You could maybe do something interesting with it, but Darkspawn doesn't. It just seems like it's completely out of place in the game. But I'm wondering whether that's not only... Obviously, it's online only to combat pirating, and I wonder whether the no backwards progression is also to combat, like, account sharing? Like, so you can't log in as your friend's account and play through the game yourself? Are they just being, so careful
yeah, I
about
guess
that?
that can maybe be it. Yeah, I guess that could possibly make sense, but it... Well, again, though, it's... Well, yeah, I guess it's just an erosion of rights because, you know, if you bought a normal, traditional single-player game, okay, fine, I make a new character. Oh, I'm going to loan this to my friend. Okay, he wants to make a new character. Fine. You know, I mean, it's, again, we're seeing an increased kind of nickel and diming of features that used to be standard in history. Like a famous example not long ago was, I think with Metal Gear Survive, I heard that they charge you money if you want an additional save.
Jesus,
so,
that's dreadful.
No, you're right. That might make sense then. That would discourage account sharing. So yeah, if you want to play through the campaign again, you have to
buy a new game,
buy another copy. But it's still weird. I don't know.
It's very weird. But yeah, like it's kind of scary. Just the companies are clearly trying to protect themselves to some extent from like piracy.
Oh, it's way beyond that. We're way past that. We're way past that.
In a lot of instances, sure. But even when it is the case that they're just trying to protect themselves from piracy, they're still doing it in a way that hurts the people who didn't pirate it. So
yeah. Like I mentioned in the video, I'm not trying to come after them in the present. Like they can launch the game with whatever scheme they want. It's once they're done with the game, as in they've stopped selling it, like that's when I feel like some liability needs to come into play, like to give players a chance, the people who bought it, a chance to run it.
Right.
Because then it's not a piracy thing. Because we don't want people to pirate our game that we're not selling.
Right.
You know, I mean, it doesn't. We're literally not going to sell it. I mean, it's no. I think the easiest explanation is the people making decisions on this do not care whatsoever about the game. It's just a numbers game.
Yes.
Where okay, we can just shut this down, and there's no liability, so there's no support. We don't have to pay the developers another day or two to kind of wrap things up or provide some helpful code so people can run this. Right. We can just shut down. We're done. Move on to the next project. And you know, I think that's the easiest. I think that's the simplest explanation for all of us is the people making decisions on it do not care about it whatsoever. It's just sort of a vessel for for some business people. It doesn't matter what they're selling or what they're running. They could be selling lumber. They could be selling toys for kids. They're selling fine art. It doesn't matter. It's just numbers to make it on. So they have no real attachment to it beyond that as far as quarterly earnings. So I think that's kind of the easiest explanation for it. That's why trying to appeal to it, I think, is probably a lost cause. That the people causing this problem aren't the ones really doing. The people who can be convinced not to do this, by and large, aren't the ones doing this in the first place. Right. You know, plenty of developers do want you playing their game in 10 years, 20 years, and they're not going to release it in such a way to make that impossible once support ends.
Right. I mean, if we made a game, you'd want people to still know who you were 20 years from now in case you make another one, right? So.
Yeah.
But in that Darkspawn episode, I think that's the one where you asked people to write letters to EA.
Yeah, that was probably misguided on my part. I was still that was me trying to do something on this, and
right.
I'm more research now since then.
So, I mean, that probably answers my question. I was just going to ask if you ever heard about anything coming of it. Like, did you ever have any
nothing.
response?
I think, well, some people told me that I think one or two of them offered them a free game or credit for it. But what I learned is they have a complete filtering system to ensure that none of this feedback ever actually makes it to any executives.
Right.
It's all kind of filtered out through secretaries and stuff so that they're not... to make sure we remain voiceless.
Right. How nice of them.
So yeah, that was my bad on that. But I'm pursuing a method, I think, with more teeth now. So
yeah, I think maybe attacking it from the legal front, and from what I heard in the game services is fraud. Games as services is fraud. Like you seem to be targeting like specific countries as well, where it seems like maybe there's certain European countries where it's more obviously against the law. Perhaps?
Yeah, I'd say right now I've actually been doing some work on that. Right now, I think the best places to start would be France and probably Australia.
Right.
They tend to have more robust consumer laws regarding this, and plus they both have examples where the consumer law prevailed over the industry for what they want. Actually, for France, I think it might have been a little bit misguided, where they actually had a recent court ruling stating that they're going to require on digital-only games to be resold, to allow them to be resold, which actually I think it could create some problems. But regardless, the fact that they actually push that through, which is way bigger than what I'm trying to do, or way more radical than what I'm aiming for, gives me a lot of encouragement to
something could happen.
Do that. Because see, the thing is, I mean, even though I'm American, and huge game market is, in the U.S., if this actually becomes the law of the land for, let's say, France or Australia, that's a big market. And what I'm proposing, I mean, I talk about the games as a service video. If this is done from the design phase of the game, this is such a minimal amount of cost to the companies in order to implement this stuff. I mean, again, we used to not do this with games. This is a problem that was created to just have no end of life, to have no way for the end user to run the game, without connecting to the company server. So if they know they're going to have to pay these fines or else miss out on that market unless they implement this, then it's going to be easier for them to just do it than to fight it.
Right.
Whereas if you compare that to something like loot boxes, where that makes them a tremendous amount of money, they're going to fight that every way they can because the stakes are too high.
Yeah.
Whereas basically I'm saying, okay, once you what I'm trying to get implemented is some legal enforcement that, you can't effectively destroy the game for the end user after the point of sale. So that might mean they have to release a patch at the end of life, in which case they'll budget that ahead of time and when they're designing it, or they release some documentation so that there's a reasonable effort to be able to, release like the packet documentation of the protocols that these calls are making, so there's a reasonable chance somebody can make a server emulator,
right,
or release source code that they're able to, that doesn't infringe upon middleware complications, or just release the server software compiled if they don't want to share the source code. There's a couple different ways they can deal with this, and that stuff can take a lot of work if it's done completely after the fact. But if you're going to have, I mean, it's so insane from a certain perspective, because it's like saying, I mean, okay, I think most people can understand that. Let's say if you have a single player game, imagine there's a law that requires the company to not destroy your single player game once they're done supporting it.
Right.
Okay, multiplayer and online stuff is more complicated, but it's not so dramatically different as you might think from a technical standpoint. I mean, actually, I was going to mention in a future video, you can make any games as a service if you want. Like, take Super Mario Brothers. Okay, that's a simple game. Well, imagine now you have to connect online in order for the game to run. And then even then, once you connect online, all the data about where the Goombas are and where the power-ups are, that's stored on the server, all right? So you can't, even if you could jump around there, you can't really have the full game unless you're connecting to the server.
Right.
So they might try to make the argument, well, it's impossible because it was designed to be an online-only game and we can't do it. Whereas everybody who's seen Super Mario knows, no, that's totally possible to have on the client side.
There's no reason for it to be online.
It's, or even if you don't want to recode it, we could run the server for Super Mario Brothers on the main, on the customer's computer or something. So I'm not trying to say it has to be any one single way, just any path that leads to the game not being utterly destroyed without the possibility of preservation is what I'm in favor for, because that's what this practice is doing. It's making preservation impossible.
Yeah, it's something feels very Orwellian about that. Like,
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it's just games, but yes, absolutely, the parallels are there. So.
Yeah, I guess one other maybe small thing to mention on this front as well is, you mentioned loot boxes. Some games obviously do have in-game purchases, and imagine if you're playing an online-only game and you make an in-game purchase, maybe an expensive one, and then you get the announcement the next week that it's shutting down, and you've just made a purchase in-game.
I'm sure that's happened with a few. Usually, when it's that overt, the companies sometimes try to save a little PR face and will offer refunds if you bought something within the past 2 weeks or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's why it's to simplify it, because the legal aspects of it get more complex than that. That's why it is a kind of fraud, because yes, they do say that this could end at any time. However, that's not really adhering to other. That's one thing some people may not understand. What's said in an end user license agreement or terms of service are not legal documents. That is not the law. So now that usually helps protect the companies in cases where there's some sort of infringement that the law does not cover. But if the company says we can do this, but then you find out later that those terms of service infringe with what the actual law says about consumer law about selling a product, then those things are meaningless.
Right. Because
you can write whatever you want in there. Now, they usually do consult lawyers, but they try to overreach on this stuff and try to have kind of a suppression effect to make you think that you have no rights on this. Where, again, my research on this showed that it is untested. And what's interestingly enough is that the French court ruling against Valve recently, the High Paris court, where they said that the games have to be digital games have to be able to be resold, which is a different issue than what I'm trying to cover. However, their reasoning for that they're selling this as a product and not a service, it's pretty much exactly what I'm saying in my video.
Right. Yeah.
So in other words, the exact same logic led to a court ruling against the games industry. Unfortunately, it's for a totally different issue, but I wish they could have just swung a little bit to the left, and then it would have covered what I'm trying to do. But that I think that creates a big opening.
Yeah,
so.
At least there's some hope in there, right? Because when you
I feel vindicated because I have people telling me that even the game industry, they'd never heard of this before, and I can believe it. This is kind of new territory, and you mentioned Orwellian. It's just been kind of accepted, and look, there's a lot of things you can complain about with modern games, but to me, this just goes it just bothers me in a way that other practices don't. Because I guess say if a company does something to a game and you don't like it, well, then you can decide, well, okay, is the game still worth playing? Maybe it is, even though it's not as good anymore. Or, you know what? They ruined the game. I don't want to play it anymore. Okay, fine. Well, I'm talking about, what if you like the game? What if you think this game is wonderful? You paid money for it. You would like to keep playing this game. No, that you have no control over that. And it's like, that this is kind of, that's not something really normal in just consumerism in general. We're kind of, it's taking away rights that wouldn't have even been possible in the past. So.
Yeah, it's hopefully the fact that we have got something like the French ruling feels like a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, because when you go to like the EA shutdown page, it's terrifying to see just how long those lists are.
Oh,
that's one company. It's scary, but hopefully maybe we can move towards something a bit better.
I heard one. Okay, take this with a grain of salt because this is completely unconfirmed. But I heard somebody emailed me who apparently works within EA, and apparently they're backing off of that, saying, "Oh, we don't really do that anymore because of bad PR." Well, yeah, sure they don't. They don't do that until the next CEO comes in. In other words, I mean, that's no guarantee. I'm really trying to get companies to implement end of life plans, so they can run it, they can sell the game for 3 months and then be done with it, or they can sell it for 10, 15 years for some of these. So
if someone was watching this who really cared about this issue as well, is there anything people can help you with? Or is this being fought more on much more of like a legal
maybe. I mean, see, that's another point I make in my video is I'm probably not the best person to be handling this. It's just that I feel like
no one else seems to be.
I feel like nothing else is being done. Yeah, well, I'd say watch the Games as a Service is fraud video and watch I think it's called Dead Game News, Valve, France versus Valve, and maybe the rest of the world. Watch those two, and then that might give you some ideas of how you can help. Or I have my contact information in those videos. Basically, right now, my plan is to try to appeal to the consumer, the equivalent consumer protection bureaus in France and maybe later Australia. Try to push this argument. I'm actually going to try to rally together some game preservation groups too to discuss it before I have a bigger push, so that this can maybe be all at once and they can see it's maybe thousands of people concerned about this rather than just one or two. But yeah, I'm figuring this out as I go. I mean, obviously, if you're an expert on consumer law in those areas, that's more helpful, but that most people aren't. I'm certainly not. It was a struggle making those videos as I did. But yeah, I'd say watch those videos. Maybe those will give you some ideas how you can help.
Cool.
And again, you can contact me directly from those.
Fantastic. I think probably hits everything about dying games. I might just wrap up with a couple other quick questions about just things you've done on your channel. I've not really asked you about Freeman's Mind yet, which I think is probably the most likely thing people would know you from. So I had one question for you on that, which is you often go off on like tangents talking about just really random stuff in those episodes, which I think is what makes them so entertaining a lot of the time.
I think that's my strength for
I think so too.
my whole career, to be honest.
I wondered how much of that is research you do for the episodes, and how much it is just things that you already remember or knew, and it's just things reminding you of those in the videos.
Oh, geez. I'd say almost all of it is just kind of the equivalent of daydreaming or letting your mind wander.
Right.
And then if I'll get on certain topics where I'll wonder myself, then I might do some follow-up research to see if, like, well, okay, where does this thought take me? Like, what's the actual truth on this? And one exception is sometimes since I'm playing Freeman, I try to occasionally bolster his physics cred. Right. For that, I try to do some research because I'm not. The most I had was AP Physics in high school, so I'm not an expert by any means. So I'll occasionally try to drop in some terms that only physicists would probably know. Yeah, like.
I just can't believe it. Those monkeys in there are having trouble learning about gravity, whereas I can recite the quantum chromodynamic gauge invariant Lagrangian in my sleep. There is no justice.
I think the one I memorized was I can recite the quantum chromodynamic gauge invariant Lagrangian in my sleep. That's real. So, I think that was for one Freeman's Mind episode. I was trying to see if I could find any. Yeah, I wanted to blame the death. I wanted to blame a death of a physicist on ninjas.
Ninjas understand quantum mechanics better than people realize. That was a controversial part of my dissertation.
So I did some research. Okay, has any physicist died from mysterious causes? Like, yep, I found one. They're like, he died at sea or something. It's like, or he went missing, and nobody's sure what happened. Fought ninjas. There,
amazing.
There we go. So,
I didn't even know there was research.
So I figured people
might
hear that. They might look that up, and they'll be like, oh wow, he actually went missing.
Ettore Majorana, brilliant theoretical physicist, friends with Heisenberg. Wasn't much older than me before he was killed by ninjas.
I like being able to do stuff like that.
That's attention to detail. I like it. There's also an episode of I'm going to go back to Game Dungeon where you covered Super Cult Tycoon. And you talk a lot about how to actually start and run a cult.
Like driving around and grabbing people to come into a van will be one method of recruitment, and not necessarily the most stable one. Better methods will be to campaign on college campuses, some church groups, yoga or meditation classes, natural food stores. In my opinion, those are the rich spots for recruitment.
And again, I'm just like, was that just all research for that episode? Are you just making stuff up for it? Is it things you've heard before?
No. Well, it's. I guess I have a. You wouldn't think it looking at me. I have a degree in criminal justice and a minor in psychology.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of that would just sort of overlap. You would see some cases where you'd understand like how this stuff would progress. I think I read a book before on. I'd seen movies and stuff, but I think I read a book before on like some actual cults or a cult story. I don't know. No, I didn't actually do that much research on it. It was just sort of on. I mean, I don't know. Television and movies don't always give an accurate portrayal of some things, but some things they can do a decent job. Like I guess. Imagine you're somebody who like watches a lot of like medical shows, like ER stuff. So you know that maybe not everything they show on there is accurate, but you're gonna know some procedure on some things. I think it's something like that. I probably encountered a lot of the real cases. I mean, we learned about Charles Manson in one of the classes I had, so that was an example of that sort of thing. But
I'm glad to know.
And then you find out how some cults get broken up and. Like how the investigations might work for them. So I don't know. It just sort of came off easily for me.
So when's the cult of Ross starting then?
I don't want to be when civilization starts stopping. How about that?
Good to know.
I mean, I don't really want to be a cult leader, but sure, I'll take that. I'll take cult life over anarchy. So
you could always get all your cult followers to try and make killing games illegal. Have the cult of living games.
If I've actually gone into a cult, I'm probably gonna have bigger things on my mind than that. So I mean, I look, as much as I care about the issue, I recognize that in the grand scheme of things, it's not as serious as some other topics. So it's kind of a dichotomy I'm juggling in my mind with. So
I've got one completely random question for you.
Sure.
Just because I don't think I've ever heard you talk about it. Obviously, you're American. Why did you move to Poland?
Oh, well, two reasons, but the primary one is my wife is Polish.
Okay, so you met her before you moved over.
Yeah, she sought me out after seeing my videos. So I started talking with her, and then we did Skype chat, and I thought I'd come visit her. So she was, now wife. We were together for a few years before we got married, but even before that, I had actually been considering leaving the U.S. anyway, just because of cost of living. Right. Purely because I can kind of live supporting the both of us here for about the same price as living by myself in the U.S. And that was, geez, that's with. Well, it gets into more variables, but yeah, that's the simple version.
Okay.
It's not like hatred of the U.S. or anything like that. No. It's just, I'm practical to a certain extent.
I wasn't sure if you met Magda before you went or after, if that was the reason you'd went over. So I was just curious.
Yeah, well, we did Skype chats, that sort of thing, for a while. And at the time, I was earning income online. It's funny because it was all kind of working out too, because I've been meeting with my friends, but it's like wherever I've lived, it's like I'll be meeting my friends and then they go and move somewhere else. So everybody's getting split 4 ways anyway, so that, I didn't have much tying me down where I was at the time. Right. So it's, I knew I'd regret, I'd regret not doing it, right, regardless of how it turned out, because, I'm not used to having women seek me out, I guess.
But yeah, last couple of questions. I've just, mostly for my own curiosity, things previously mentioned on episodes that are years old now, and just how relevant they still are.
Yeah, sure.
Like, you worked on, someone promised to print you the Revenant map if you finished it.
According to him, it can be up to 44 inches wide and whatever length I need it to be. So now I have to finish it. I'll have to get a frame for this sucker too. The image is massive. It's only about a third done and is around 24,000 by 10,000 pixels. And to quote him, in a year's time we'll probably have both forgotten about this. We'll see.
Oh, I won't forget what you said, Chris.
I still need, okay, you know, I started following up on that. I was getting some volunteer help. And then I noticed my old map, the color of the new screenshots was misaligned slightly. It's like, what happened?
Oh, no.
I started doing some tests. I didn't quite figure it out. And so that kind of discouraged me. So I'm going to come back to it. I have somebody who was offering to help me out with that, where
Nice.
I would record the footage from Revenant, give them a chunk, and they could help make it more of a group effort. Oh yeah, I'm gonna follow up on it.
Nice.
I mean, but I had a lot of things can be like that, where I'll be like, all right, let's do it, and then I'll hit a roadblock. I'll try it, and then I realize this is gonna take more time than I realized, and that kind of makes me put it off more. A whole lot of things can be like that with me. Sure. I've had a lot of starts that I plan to come back to. I don't even want to think of how many things are like that. So,
when you played Still Life, you mentioned that you were maybe gonna do the sequel as its own episode.
Yeah,
Is that
another perfect example of that. Where, okay, a bit of a spoiler: the sequel is not very good.
Right.
In fact, that might be one of the biggest falls of grace I've seen from like the predecessor.
That's a shame.
To the sequel. So I'm not really in a hurry to play through that game.
Right.
But yeah, I'll do that eventually.
Well, another question, because I was surprised you knew it, and I'm curious as to how. When you played Potty Pigeon, the music for that is All Creatures Great and Small.
Yeah.
Which obviously I'm aware of as an Englishman. I was just wondering how you knew about that actual song.
Well, I didn't have cable TV for most. I think there was we did for a year or two, then my parents canceled it just to save on money.
Right.
So mostly just got PBS and just whatever other free channels there were. And All Creatures Great and Small would occasionally appear on PBS. I never really watched
weird.
the show, but I saw enough of it to know the theme.
It's bizarre to me that like a little
It
BBC
wasn't my
show
kind
would
of
be
show as a kid, you know. But yeah.
And I think maybe my last question here is you asked in I think it's Strife. You asked about music sorting enlightenment, and I wondered if you
Oh yeah,
if you had
that's
any...
still ongoing.
This has been a personal quest of mine for some time now. As fans know, soundtracks are incredibly varied. You have music that sounds like it belongs in a desert war zone, deep space, a fantasy jungle, underwater, the realm of a transdimensional being. It just goes on forever. So my question is, how do you organize this stuff to listen to?
That's still one of my ongoing I mean, yeah, if anybody watching this, if you feel, well, one of my quests is to come up with, I'm a soundtrack junkie, but there's really not a good system out there for sorting soundtracks in ways that they sound similar. You know, if you're listening to like calm stuff and you want more, because there's such a massive variety in how music sounds for soundtracks. I was making a lot of progress on a system. I can send you all my notes if you want. You can email me.
Sure.
rosswscott@gmail.com. And I think eventually I'll figure this. This is the sort of thing AI would be great for, except I'm pretty sure all the AI for this is under lock and key by major companies like, you know, Spotify or something, where they have their own special system that the public's not going to get access to.
Right.
Being able, because a whole lot of soundtracks aren't in any sort of standard like album listing or, you know, for sale, because they're just released it with the game and that's it. So yeah, that's one of my ongoing quests. If you want to help with that, see what I have so far.
Yeah,
but my dream goal is to be able to just pick a song or like a category, kind of a mood that I like, and then all the other tracks will sort of sound like that. Now, I'm fine with sorting it myself, except I need to figure out the criteria, because it's a bit maddening, because music's a pretty multi-dimensional thing.
So when you say system as well, do you mean like a software specifically, or just a
Oh
strategy?
no. Well, I mean that would be a convenience afterwards. No, well, where I am with this is I'm trying to figure, like, if I hear a piece of music that I like, and there's a couple ways you can go about it. Where, I mean, if it's like a real standard kind of thing, like, okay, this is obviously rock. It's like, let's say it's a little upbeat. Okay, well, let's just throw all the upbeat rock into this category. We're done, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it has like these tones of strife, or maybe it just does some weird stuff where you're not even sure how to classify this, but it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Like there's some. So let's see what's this example people might be. Well, some of the music of Super Meat Boy. That is kind of a variety to it.
Yeah.
Or maybe like some droning music in the desert, like from Borderlands or something. Or hey, here's an easy, well, not an easy one, but some of the original music for StarCraft, where it starts out with this sort of country feel, but then it goes into more modern contemporary instruments, and it like transitions from country to spacey. How do you want to sort that? Like, maybe I guess where I am for a lot of tracks is to either go with ones where it has a really specific mood and kind of style, or think about when would I want to be listening to this music. So maybe for music like that, you want that for if you play a strategy game, or another music might be good if you're playing a racing game, if it's rapid, or if you just want to calm music. So this is a highly subjective thing. So it's going to be different for every person. But the thing is, every time I feel like I'm making progress on a system, I'll hear a bunch of tracks where I just have no idea how I want to sort these.
Right.
Oh, here's another common one. Was it Ridley's theme from Metroid? Like, it's kind of mysterious, but it's really neat. Like, okay, how would you personally sort that so that you listen to that, you want to hear other mysterious sounding music, or that? So if I can figure out the criteria, like, okay, I have my system, so if I hear a track, I can figure out where I want to put it. If I can do that, then everything else will fall into place. It just takes time. But, and again, that's subjective. It's going to be different for different people.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I have plenty of stumper tracks that I'd be curious how people would sort them. So, I mean, soundtracks are just so diverse that it's
Even within one game as well, of course.
Oh yeah, it can be like that.
Nice.
I mean, I don't really want to. I mean, I'll have the tags, but I don't really want to do it by artist or album, because I don't know if it's you don't want, like, I don't know, especially for calmer stuff. Like, let's say you want to listen to music while you're studying or reading or exercising. You kind of want it to be kind of tempo is very important. So you kind of want it to be in the same ballpark there, and the same tone. Like, for me personally, I wouldn't want to hear like generally upbeat music immediately switch to something really somber, even if the pacing and the instruments are kind of the same. Other things can be weirder, where I don't know how, because do you want to mix stuff that's obviously like 8-bit with stuff that sounds like it could have been played in the Middle Ages,
Right.
you know, with flutes and minstrels? Oh yeah, I'll let you go if you need to. I'm not.
No, I'm all good. But I think that is pretty much the end of my questions. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Ross. Have you got any parting words?
More videos coming.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. All right. Well, yeah, thank you for watching, everyone. Hopefully this is the first of many special guest episodes. I'd like to get more people in, but I'm really glad I got Ross for the first one, because definitely one of my favourite YouTubers out there. So thank you for joining me.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.